Well, the summer of cricket is coming to an end, but it can't before one more episode of Outside the Rope, proudly brought to you by Prime Video. My name is Sam Jordan. I'm filling the seat for Matt Thompson today, and I have the honour of sitting alongside Mark Taylor and Ian Chappell. Gentlemen, how are you going?
Good, thanks.
Very well, mate.
We are just one day away from the final test of the summer, the Sydney Test. Gee, it comes around pretty quickly, doesn't it, the summer of cricket? And I have just got back from speaking to Pat Cummins. We don't have a team yet. He's keeping his cards close to his chest, and there's been plenty of talk around what this team will look like. Mitchell Starc is out. We also have Cameron Green out as well. The big question, who comes in?
Well, as you alluded to, Sam, there's plenty of options for Australia. I would personally like to see Australia go with just 5 batters. Move the keeper Carey to 6, and then have someone at 7 who becomes, I suppose, a bowling all-round. Now, it sounds like it's going to be Ashton Agar, which I'm not against trying, although Ashton Agar's record doesn't demand selection, particularly as someone who's going to bat at 7. Averages about 26 in first-class cricket with the bat and nearly 42 with the ball. So he's not knocking the door down, but he seems to be the one most preferred. So if he plays at 7, it allows Australia to then obviously play Nathan Lyon, 2 spinners, and then the 3 quicks that you think are in the best form. It's going to be hard to leave Boland out, but I'd also like to see Hazlewood play. I think Josh Hazlewood's got to get back playing. He only played 2 test matches last calendar year that is. So I'd like to see Josh Hazlewood play also.
Chappelli, we were chatting about Ashton Agar's figures just a few moments ago. Do you think he's ready to have a recall to the test team?
Oh, he's not a test bowler. I mean, I think he's probably a better batsman than he is a bowler. But the problem Australia have got is it doesn't matter who they pick, it'll succeed because South Africa can't bat. So that's a major problem. And also we're talking about some innovative selections. Well, I don't see where they're going to come from. I don't think they're going to come from this panel because I think they're a very conservative panel. If they weren't a conservative panel, surely they would have given Morris a game in Adelaide. That was the time to... I mean, the thing with... There's a couple of things. I remember speaking to Andy Roberts, who was not only a great fast bowler, but a smart one. And he said years ago, you've got to pick fast bowlers when they're fast. And therefore, Morris, to me, was a guy you had to look at. And that's the second thing. You've got to find out if a guy can do it at test level. It's terrific to have Shield players jumping around. And as a selector, you need to be able to look at that and see what's really going on. But then you need to play them in test cricket to find out if they can make test players jump around. And when you see Nortje's performance for South Africa, you think, well, good pace is going to get any batsman jumping around. So let's have a look at Morris. But Adelaide, to me, was when you had 2 guys missing from Adelaide, that was the time to have a look at Morris and see if he could do it.
Well, it feels like the stars are seemingly aligning now. Mitchell Starc is out, so Morris provides that like-for-like replacement in terms of pace. It's also a dead rubber as well as they start the selectors looking towards that Tour of India and then the Ashes as well. Is this the time that Lance Morris needs to be played?
Well, Adelaide was the time to play him. They didn't. Now's another time. But this like-for-like rubbish, that's rubbish. You've got to pick your best side. Now, not only do you pick your best side, but you pick the team to win that match, but also with an eye on the future. And okay, the future is they're going to India and then they're going to England. So that's another reason why you want to have a look at Morris, see if he's good enough, because Morris, if you think he's good enough, he's the perfect bloke to be taking on those tours.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think people get carried away with this. You don't want to be handing out baggy greens. That's what people get scared of. But I agree with Chaps that you need to pick a side. Yes, you think you can win. I think no matter what side Australia pick, they will win this test match. But obviously, provided the weather doesn't intervene. But they've got to get a look at, as I agree with Chaps, with someone like Lance Morris. They've got India coming up, and then they've got a 5-test series of England. And they're going to have a lot of quick bowlers to choose from. Boland, Nessa, the big 3, the incumbent 3, Lance Morris. So there's 6 I can name already. That doesn't include Jai Richardson. So there's 7. They've got to try and find their best 5 for England. So if you're not going to play someone like Lance Morris now, he's not going to get an opportunity prior to that Ashes side being picked. So I'm with Chaps. I think they've got to pick him for this game. I'd leave Boland out, play Hazlewood, play Cummins. There's your 3 quicks. 2 spinners, 5 batters and a keeper. Done.
So often with the white ball team, we see players injured, players unavailable for selection, and it allows new blood to come into the team. Not so much with our test setup. Given the fact that it is a dead rubber and we are starting to look ahead, is it okay this time for selectors to say, you know what, we do just want to take this opportunity? I know the Sydney Test is always a big deal, but is it okay to start thinking like that for Australian cricket?
Well, I've always said that you should have one former aggressive batsman on the selection panel. If you can get 2 there, that's even better. But the reason I say that is because an aggressive player, who was a good player, will probably select aggressively. And I don't see that on this panel. They're a conservative bunch, and conservative players, ex-players, are likely to pick conservatively. And what bothers me there is that if you're in a bit of trouble, they'll say, wow, the guy to get us out of trouble is the fellow who comes in and he hangs around and he shows a lot of guts. Well, every now and again those guys can be helpful to you, but also don't discount the guys who work on the basis that the best form of defence is attack. Because you have a look at international cricket, particularly at the moment, can bowlers bowl to someone who's attacking them? Well, England have just won, 8 on the trot? By attacking the opposition, and the opposition haven't been able to maintain line and length under fire. So what Stokes' team is doing has been terrific, but it's also saying we don't believe the opposition can maintain good line and length under fire. Now, it'll be tested against Australia because they have got a bowling attack who have been under fire and they can come back and, hurt you. So that'll be a big test. But what I'm saying is, don't be afraid. I mean, David Warner is a classic example. If you go back to David Warner's original time, all those people who said Dave Warner was a T20 batsman who played Test cricket, talking through their hat. David Warner was always a batsman and a very good batsman. And he's shown, apart from the fact that he's shown you need a lot of guts to do that at the top, not only courage here, but intellectual courage. But also he's shown that bowlers don't like having it thrown back at them, and a lot of them fall by the wayside. So, that's why I think you need that selector who will take a chance on your panel.
Well, we're reading a lot into what this team will look like for the Sydney Test. South Africa, when they came out here, were ranked 2nd in the world at one point on their way out. Unfortunately, they haven't played like it. That's for sure. Now, I don't know if I'm being an optimist. Is there anything that we've seen to think that they will be better in this test than what we've seen in the past 2, particularly at the MCG?
Well, I think last time we spoke here, we were very concerned about South Africa's batting. And we've seen nothing in the first 2 test matches to alleviate that issue. I can't see how they're going to make enough runs, to cobble together enough runs to worry Australia in this test match. And that was their concern before this series started. Dean Elgar is their best equipped player, although he's a guy who, as chaps alluded to a moment ago, he's a guy who sort of hangs in there, makes his wicket generally hard to get, but Australia have been able to knock him over early, which at the top of the order can happen, particularly against a quality bowling attack. But he's got 13 test match hundreds. The rest of his team, the best they've got is 1 between them. That suggests that they don't have the pedigree at this stage to worry Australia, because it's big scores, it's big hundreds that win your test matches, or at least changes your test matches. So I can't see how South Africa are going to get out of the problems that they're in until they start finding some batsmen who, as they did in yesteryear, can make hundreds to win them test matches. There's
concern when the Australian public start cheering for the touring team to try and last the game that little bit longer. Looking back on the summer that we've had, the West Indies and now South Africa here as well, is there reason for concern about the future of Test cricket and what we're seeing from some of these nations, particularly South Africa, who, it doesn't feel like that long ago they were one of the powerhouses of the world game. What they've served up here has been disappointing.
Well, I mean, Test cricket's been in trouble for quite a long time now. And, if you're being realistic, I mean, you would have to ask the question, how did Afghanistan and Ireland get Test status? But even go back before that, how did Bangladesh get Test status? How did Zimbabwe keep Test status when they fell away terribly? They had a good side and then they fell away terribly. So that's a problem. But now, if you look at who should be playing Test cricket, you're probably down to the big 3, Australia, India, England. Then you've got Pakistan, who will keep producing decent players. You've got New Zealand, who play well above their weight. Sri Lanka have got an infrastructure, but politically you're not sure how that's going to go. West Indies, South Africa, terrible. So at the moment I'd say Test cricket should be played by 8 nations, and that could be a number that's reducing fairly quickly.
Mark? Oh, sorry, go
I
on.
don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I would say 6 to 8.
Yeah.
Max 8. The other concern is that, yes, South Africa is certainly one of those nations which, go back 5 years ago, they were still one of the sides to beat in world cricket.
right.
Now, in the next lot of what they call it, the Future Tours program, they've opted to play less Test cricket. So they're saying that, no, we don't want to play as many games as we're playing. So that's only going to lead to further diminishing of the standard of their first-class play. Yes, it might improve their T20 play, but the worry is that if they only got one Test batsman at the moment in their side that's got more than one Test 100, that's not going to improve markedly if they're only going to play 5 games a year.
It's an incredible stat, isn't it, about the batting lineup. Other side of the fence, Australia, okay, it's been a dominant summer, but what have you made of what we've seen so far from the Aussies this summer?
Well, I think if you want to look at Australia realistically, yes, the form is very good, and they've got a very good bowling attack, and you can build a cricket team very quickly around a good attack. And Australia have got some decent batsmen, but where the problem comes is if you look for the future. And you've got to start looking at the future because what's Warner, nearly 36, Khawaja about the same, Smith's 33. So down the track, we're going to have to find some good young batsmen. And you like to look at the Shield competition and see young batsmen who are scoring a lot of runs. And when I say a lot of runs, I mean hundreds. It doesn't have to be every innings, but you like to see 500-600s from a player in a season. And bear in mind that they're not playing against the Test players anymore. So that's where I'd be concerned if I was an Australian selector, looking at who's coming through in the way, not old heads that have been around for a long time. I'm looking for young players, and I'm not seeing much. Spin bowling is the other area. I mean, pace bowling is looking after itself. Spin bowling, that's a problem as well.
Now, there are a few players who, well, it's hard to single out some of the players that have impressed this summer so far, but we're going to go through a couple of them very quickly. Let's start with Mitchell Starc. He's the kind of player who, on multiple occasions, has skipped playing in the IPL to prioritise playing for his country. This feels like the summer where Mitchell Starc was really starting to be appreciated across the board as a bowler.
Yeah, and I think Mitchell Starc certainly has lifted as well.
Yeah.
You're right, he's made some tough calls on his financial future. I think some smart calls about not playing in the IPL to get his body right, because that's the thing that has let him down up to the last probably 18 to 24 months. He's missed a number of, I remember Boxing Day Test matches, he missed 3 or 4 in a row there at one stage because he wasn't, they were red flagging him, he had health issues. Now, this year, we've seen the very best of Mitchell Starc. He's been the bowler, the fast bowler Australia have relied on. He's been there every Test match. Obviously, he'll miss Sydney. But that's the first Test match he'll miss for quite a while. So he's gone from this sort of maligned character who's missed every second or third game to the guy that we've now has been the warhorse, but also has bowled quick, has been the intimidator. And obviously, last Test match he bowled with that broken finger. But before that, I thought he was excellent for Australia right throughout 2022 when they were in Pakistan and they were in Sri Lanka. Mitchell Starc was playing every game, and that's a real credit to him because he certainly has lifted.
Chappelle, have you seen a difference in Mitchell Starc?
Oh, Mitchell Starc's never been a problem in my opinion. I think he's a very good bowler. Mitchell Starc might cost you a few runs every now and again, but there are players that you shouldn't look at that. You've got to look at figures and say, can this guy get me wickets? If he can get you wickets, I don't care if he gets 5 for 120 off 15 overs. I don't care about the 120. I care about the 5 wickets. And particularly when you've got other bowlers around him who can bowl tidily. You want a wicket taker, Starc's a wicket taker. So no problem with him at all.
Now, Scott Boland's heroics were so widespread last summer with the Boxing Day debut. you know what? A lot of people thought that was going to be a flash in the pan, but the way he's played throughout this summer in his limited opportunities, he's been outstanding. For so long, Australian cricket has had the big three. Is Scott Boland now in a position where, with every match, he needs to be seriously considered in our pace attack?
Well, you know, here it depends. I mean, you know what Scott Boland can do, and Scott Boland will do that wherever he goes. And you take Scott Boland to England for sure because you know that he'll bowl well. But if you want to find out about somebody else, i.e. Lance Morris, Scott Boland could be the guy that you could drop because you know that I can pick him 2 weeks later or a month later and he'll bowl well. So, yeah, Scott Boland's a good, steady bowler, but you know what he can do. So find someone. If you've got someone who can bowl 150 clicks, here's a former opening batsman. He'll tell you. Now, okay, I'll ask you a simple
I want him in my
question.
team, but not against me. That's my,
I'll ask you a simple question. You're facing someone who bowls 135, someone who bowls 150, and they bowl about the same way each. Which one do you want to face?
obviously, you want to face the guy who's slower because he's going
Of
to
course.
worry you the least.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't disagree with that. I think Scott Boland is inked in for the Ashes tour.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. He's one of the first guys picked because if England, as I think they will put out pitches that have a bit in him, he is going to be an absolute handful and the sort of guy that Australia will need to play if they put out the pitches that we've seen the last two Ashes series over there. But I'm with chaps. I'd like to see a quick play this game. And as I said a moment ago, I'd like to see Hazelwood play because I think that he's another guy when he bowls at his very best is absolute world class. And unfortunately, we haven't seen enough of him in the last 12 months.
Well, we were only speaking about that a couple of weeks ago, that Scott Boland had done enough to earn the nod for the Boxing Day Test, but Josh Hazlewood has done that for such a long period of time, just because he hasn't played a lot of Test cricket in the past year. I think maybe 2 tests in the past 12 months.
That's right.
We do kind of forget how consistently good he's been.
Yeah, a couple of 200 odd wickets, average about 25, 26 with the ball over a number of years suggests that you're a fine bowler, and he is a fine bowler, Josh Hazlewood. He's had a little bit of a period that Mitchell Starc had a few years ago, just having a few little niggles. Seems to be available for the white ball games. He's played World Cups, he's played both 50 over and T20 World Cups. He's playing those 3 formats of the game, and unfortunately, when he's coming into, I think, first class or test match cricket, he's slightly underdone and ends up with a niggle because he's not getting the miles in the legs that he was maybe in yesteryear. So I'd like to see Hazel get some miles in the legs, and we'll start seeing the best of him.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the last player we're going to quickly touch on as well is, of course, David Warner. There were so many questions around him and his form coming into the Boxing Day Test. He answered them emphatically. Now, I think it's quite agreed now that he seems to have booked his plane ticket for both India and England. The ball's in his court with that. But how do you see David Warner playing over the next 2 tours? There was a thought that maybe he could have pulled up stumps at the end of the Australian summer, but the way he spoke, particularly after Boxing Day, he's very determined to go on and I think prove a point over in England as well.
Well, the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, who's making the criticism? And I'd say my answer to that is nobody who knows what they're talking about. Because the simple thing as a selector is to drop someone. That's the easy part. The hard part is to find someone who you think can be better. Now, you name me an opening batsman in Australia who's better than David Warner. No one. And no one's even close. Now, as far as I'm concerned, David Warner retires when David Warner wants to retire. Now, you take him to India, you take him to England if he wants to go. And now, if he fails in those 2 places, the problem you've got is who behind him was going to succeed. I'd say, I mean, your best bet is the guy they've included in the squad, Renshaw. Renshaw's a far better player than Short. I thought Renshaw got wide-handed a bit when he was dropped in the first place. But Renshaw, to me, is a far better opening batsman than Short.
Now, Harris, you mean?
Harris, I mean.
yes.
Yeah, Harris.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
And I think the key to David Warner is maintaining that hunger, because there's no doubt he's got it at the moment. I don't think he ever lost it.
No.
But then obviously he's had a lot on his plate over the last 6 to 8 months. And in Melbourne, he was able to clear his mind and focus on being the sort of player that we know David Warner can be. And he showed that on day 2 under terrible hot conditions at the MCG. If he can maintain that rage, I think he's going to be very hard to stop, because there's no doubt he wants to finish his career the way that he wants to finish it. not the way everyone else or other people may want to finish it. So if he can maintain that focus on performing as he did at the MCG, I think he can play as long as he wants to play.
Well, the next stop for David Warner and the Australian team will be in India. The Tour of India is not too far down the line as well. It's been 19 years since Australia won a Test series in India. Is this the team that can break that?
I think they can win over there because I don't think India are playing that well either. But obviously bowling them out is going to be the key. We've got the quicks. There's no doubt we've got the quicks. And once again, that Lance Morris could be that sort of X factor if we can see what he can do. Because I'll be honest, I haven't seen Lance Morris bowl.
Yeah.
So all the stuff I'm hearing has just been talk so far. So I'd love to see him bowl. But obviously it's going to be how well Nathan Lyon can bowl and whether Ashton Agar can be that second spinner over there and get wickets. As I said a moment ago, he's 154 wickets at 41.84 in first-class cricket doesn't demand selection. So I only hope that he's improved on those stats because Australia are going to need more from him over there if they're going to win a series.
Well, there's a couple of parts.
And can they make runs in India?
Yeah.
That's the other big question. Sure, you only win a Test match by taking 20 wickets. That's very important. But as South Africa have shown, if you keep getting bowled out for under 200, it demoralises your own bowlers. I mean, South Africa haven't got a bad bowling attack, but you get demoralised. If you've got to put your bowling boots on, you go and bowl your guts out and you bowl the opposition out, and then 5 minutes later you're bowling again because your batsman can't bat, it eventually it saps your energy and it's also demoralising. And, you know, that's what Australia need. You know, I used to say about the team that I had, we had a good bowling attack. So I used to say, if we get 350 and get them quickly, we'll win more than we lose. That's what Australia have got to do. They've got to get 300 to 350 in India, then they've got an attack that can win.
Absolutely. Now it's, I guess with that context, a very big few days for Ashton Agar if he does get the nod for selection. I guess this next one's a question in a few parts. I guess firstly, do Australia play two spinners in India? Do we need to play two spinners in India, you know, regardless of what the individual pitches serves up?
That's what you got to play.
Yeah.
You don't pick two spinners because you got to have two spinners.
Yep.
You pick your best bowlers.
And that's why I think the Sydney Test is, as you say, crucial for Ashton Agar. Because he hasn't played a Test match since 2017.
Long time.
So what's that? 5 and a bit years since his last Test match. So and I think he's only played 4, and the highlight for him so far has been 98 on debut with the bat. So there's been no real highlight with the ball. So if he can bowl well here in Sydney and maybe give us a highlight, give himself a highlight that actually tells himself that he can bowl good players out. And he's going to need to bowl good players out. So that's going to be the key for him. So yeah, big game for him, and I agree with Chaps. If he's not up to it with the ball, and you don't think he's in your best 4 or 5 bowlers, you don't play him.
Well, if it's a respectable performance from Ashton Agar, does he bump Mitch Swepson down the pecking order, given the fact that Agar does offer a bit with the bat as well?
The problem the selectors have got is that Agar will probably bowl all right in Sydney because he's not bowling against decent batsmen.
Yeah.
But then he goes to India, and if you're bowling to Kohli and Rohit Sharma and blokes like that who can really play, you could get hammered if you're not that good a bowler. So that's a problem the selectors have got. Is he ahead of Mitch Swepson? Well, Swepson, you know, I don't know what's gone on there, but I thought Swepson was an up-and-comer a few years ago. They took him to Pakistan. He didn't do a hell of a lot. But, you know, if Swepson is your next best bowler, why isn't he playing at the SCG?
I've no doubt he's jumped over Mitch Swepson. I think because of those 2 tours, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, has in a way cost him because he bowled on those flat decks in Pakistan. He didn't get a wicket.
Didn't offer a lot,
No, and Lyon didn't bowl them out either, but Lyon got some decent hauls, got some wickets, albeit for a lot of runs. They then go to Sri Lanka, and Swepson got, I think, a 2 for and a 3 for. But once again, didn't bowl as well as the Sri Lankan spin bowlers. So I suspect that his name hasn't been rubbed out forever. But I think the Australian selectors have thought, well, we've got to try someone else other than Swepson.
But my problem with the selection is, are they picking because we've got a left and a right-hander, rather than are we picking the best bowler? I don't care whether they're right arm, left arm, if they fire the ball out of their backside. As long as they get wickets, that's the important thing. So I'm not picking guys because they're left and right-handed. I'm picking guys because they can bowl. That's what I want.
Now, victory in the Sydney Test over the next few days will all but confirm Australia's place in the World Test Championship final. Of course, we missed out in the inaugural cycle just a couple of years ago, and it's looking like we will be playing India in that decider in England. And that's, I guess, interesting timing given that we'll be coming out of a tour of India and going into an Ashes. Who benefits more in the English conditions?
So are India, how much of a chance?
They're pretty clear at the moment on the standings. Yeah, the way that this Test series has panned out with South Africa, I guess getting steamrolled certainly has kind of removed them from realistic calculations. So that is the way that it looks like it's going.
Yeah, and the other thing is that England played poorly in the start of this rotation that they've got themselves behind the 8 ball. Because really, if you're picking the 2 best teams for that World Test Championship, it'd be Australia v England.
Yeah.
And you can almost start the Ashes series off with the Test Championship.
Yeah.
But that's obviously not going to happen.
Yeah.
England under Stokes, not England under Root.
Yeah, that's right.
Joe Root is the worst international captain I've ever seen.
And now former captain as well for that reason.
Oh, and he should, in hindsight, he should never have got the job. Who would win out of Australia and India in England? That'll be a decent, a decent contest. Well, you hope it will be a decent contest, and it's better that you have a decent contest in that final rather than have a one-sided thing if it was South Africa playing, which I think it would be if South Africa played. So I'm delighted that at least you're going to have 2 out of the 3 really good sides.
Well, India's shown a bit playing in England over the past few years as well. They've had some really good performances.
Absolutely, and you go back to the previous World Test Championship where New Zealand beat India.
Yeah.
It just shows you what can happen. If you went going into that game, you probably thought that India were the favourites.
Yep.
And yet New Zealand, as they often do, come out fighting, always punch above their weight and deserved winners in that game. So I'm with Chaps. I don't know who's going to win it, but if that is the final, I think it's going to be a cracking game.
Well, then it all culminates with the Ashes. A yes or no answer. Do Australia win the Ashes this year in England? Mark?
Can't give you a yes or no. There's a whole lot of things can happen. So you'd be a fool if you said yes or no. But the thing that's really important is you've got 2 very good sides going at each other. And particularly England playing the way they're playing now under Stokes. Stokes is a decent leader. That was England's big problem before. So the thing I'd say to you is you've got 2 very good teams going at each other. That's what you want to see in Test cricket.
And the thing I'm going to like is you'll see slightly contrasting plays. Well, there's no doubt Australia will be a little bit more conservative. I'm not going to say they're going to play conservatively, but compared to England, they will. And yet England's batting still, to me, has got a lot of question marks in it. So if Cummins, Hazelwood, Stark, Boland, Morris, or whoever bowls, if Australia can be consistent and England will continue to be aggressive, that battle is going to be great to watch because England could get knocked over. They could get knocked over for 150 or less, or they could score a really quick 350, 400 and put Australia under huge pressure. That'll be great Test cricket.
Baz-ball has been the talk of world cricket, the style of play that we've seen from England. But as you kind of mentioned there, we haven't seen it tested against a real world-class attack.
Forget Baz-ball. That's the greatest load of rubbish I've ever heard. Why people continue to talk about coaches, I don't understand, because it's the captain and the players who take the wickets, they make the runs and they take the catches. And if they don't do their job, you can forget whoever the hell the coach is, because it's the blokes it's the 11 guys on the field that'll win you the game or lose it.
It coincides with Ben Stokes obviously taking the captaincy. Should we be calling it Ben Ball?
Just call it cricket because
aggressive cricket. That's
that's the
very
important
watchable
thing.
aggressive cricket. But interesting talking about that is you've only got to look at the scores of England over the last 10 Test matches, which I think they've won 9 of them now. They're varied in pace of how they've scored. Yes, the one game where they played Pakistan on the flattest pitch of all time,
Gone at 5s.
they scored at 7 and over.
Yeah.
But that was a ridiculous pitch, a poor pitch. Since then, in other games, they've scored at 4 and over. Now that's not ridiculous cricket. That's what the game of Test cricket is becoming because of all the other formats of the game and the way players are now produced. They're produced to be more aggressive right from the word go. So that's why I've been an advocate for many years now to look at 4-day Test cricket.
Yeah.
Because why aren't we playing, if we're going to play a faster brand of cricket, make it more interesting over a shorter period of time?
What are you thinking as a captain if the opposition scores at 7 runs and over? I mean, you might be thinking the pitch is pretty flat, but there might be something else you'd be thinking as well.
They get a few wickets, might be a good idea.
Well, the first thing you're thinking is our bowlers bowled a load of rubbish, because you cannot bowl well and go for 7 and over. You can't bowl really well and go 4 for an over. You know, that's the thing you've got to look at. How did we bowl? And if you went at 7 and over, we bowled rubbish.
Yeah, and on a very, very flat pitch.
Yeah,
So I don't think we'll see that in England.
No,
I think you'll see pitches that will have a bit in it, and I think it'll be very hard to score. Well, you won't score at 7 and over against Australia's bowling, but they may still look to score at 4 and over, which will give Australia opportunities to create dismissals.
And I think what's important with what you said, where England could get knocked over by a good bowling attack. But what's important to me with England is, yes, they get knocked over. How do they come back in the next test? And that's the problem with England at the moment, because they'll come back and probably play exactly the same. And if it succeeds, you could be the one that's looking down the barrel. And that's why it could be a marvellous series, because it could go like that. And that's, I mean, if you go back to 2005, that was a wonderful series. Why? Because it fluctuated all the time. And this one has the potential to be a similar sort of series.
Well, we mentioned David Warner before, and for good reason as well, because he's a really interesting case study, a player to watch going into the England Ashes series as well. After 183 innings in his career, he's averaging 46.41. In England, that's just 26. In fact, the last tour of England, he was averaging just 9.5 runs. We've spoken a lot about David Warner and I guess how he rediscovers his best. We saw it at the MCG and it was aggression and it was mentality. Is that the key for Dave going over to England?
I think it's that, but it's also that focus.
Yeah.
As I said a moment ago, I thought I saw it even at the Gabba, where David got knocked over twice on a pitch. The Gabba pitch was lively, to say the least. And nobody made many runs at the Gabba pitch in that first test of the South African series. But David looked focused to me. He looked very focused also at the MCG. So if the save David Warner turns up for the Ashes series on pitches which are fair and reasonable, I think he'll turn around the 9.9. What he's going to make, I don't know. But he'll enjoy the challenge. If he's focused enough to say, I want to go, I want to play there, he'll enjoy the challenge. And there's no doubt, so will Stuart Broad. He'll look forward to bowling him. And that'll just add to the contest that we're talking about.
Gee, how long have we been talking about David Warner against Stuart Broad, James Anderson as well? It's the battle that keeps giving, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Will Stuart Broad and Anderson, I mean, if you're ever going to play them together, it's going to be in England. But even now, I'd be a bit hesitant about playing them together. Yeah, and particularly, I mean, England, if they've got their full pace attack, which they could have had in Australia, bar injuries, wouldn't have mattered because they had Joe Root as a captain. But if you've got Ben Stokes and you've got Jofra Archer, Mark Wood, Ollie Stone, some real pace there. Robinson will do the job that Broad does for you anyhow, and he's younger and fitter, so he'll probably do it better. I'd be thinking play Anderson one, Broad another, but not together.
Well, there's plenty for us to look forward to as cricket fans and plenty for us to look back on as well at the end of another summer of cricket. Another one down, gentlemen, just like that. It feels like it only just started, but we are at the end of the Australian summer of cricket. A big year on the way. Thank you so much for your time today, gentlemen. I appreciate that and your insights as well. And thank you to Prime Video as well, who have proudly brought you outside the rope. We will be back with another episode sometime soon.